Hello and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. Varok Saurfang, High Overlord of the Horde, Supreme Commander of the Might of Kalimdor, the Old Soldier. This legendary orc is one of the most beloved heroes of the Horde. Back in the day, I myself appreciated him a fair bit. Unfortunately, Balfour Azeroth did irreparable damage to my opinion of him, to the point that I can almost say I hate him now. Now you may be wondering why that is, and I certainly expect this to be a controversial take, but before all that, let's do a quick run through of who Varok Saurfang is and his tenure in World of Warcraft. Saurfang's rise to prominence was just as much based on player response as it was the writers. Though he did hold the Overlord title back in vanilla, he was pretty much just a random tough NPC that was standing near the front entrance to Orgrimmar. City raids were a lot more popular back then, and with Orgrimmar you basically had two options, the main gate or the side entrance. The side entrance was usually your better option as it took you through a less populated section of the city and was closer to Thrall's actual location. But that didn't stop frontal assaults from happening. And if Horde players themselves didn't crush the raid right away, Saurfang was the first real wall you were likely to hit. He became infamous for his ability to tear through the invading raids, especially if they were not prepared to face off against him. So legendary was his defense of the city that he basically became a meme character, being credited with absolutely insane feats of strength, a la Chuck Norris. And either due to this player response or because the writers just liked him, when the gates of Anchorage were opened, Blizzard chose him to be the supreme commander of both the Alliance and the Horde forces. In the Burning Crusade, we were introduced to the Mag'har children of several important orc characters. Aside from Garrosh, the son of Gromosh, we also got Joran Deadeye, the son of Kilrog Deadeye, and Dranosh Saurfang, son of Varok Saurfang. Both Saurfangs would have a prominent role in Wrath of the Lich King. Varok was positioned at Warsong Hold in Borean Tundra, along with Garrosh, and Dranosh participated in the assault on the Wrathgate along with Bolvar Dragon. Of course, when the Lich King did show up at the Wrathgate, Dranosh fell in battle and had his soul stolen by Frostmourne. This would lead to him being converted into Deathbringer Saurfang, and he would face off against us as the fourth encounter of Icecrown Citadel. Varok helps us to defeat his son, and then collects the body to bring back to Nagrand in Outland to give him a proper burial. Saurfang also participated in the Siege of Orgrimmar, where as Horde players, you can find him having already cleared out a bunch of the manted trash leading up to the Paragons of the Claxi. Thereafter, he held pretty minimal roles until Balfour Azeroth rolled around. But at this point in time, he was easily one of the most beloved orcs in the game, over even Thrall, who many Horde players felt had neglected and abandoned the Horde. His dedication to the concept of honor and his supposed ability to cleave entire armies in half made him really cool, while his old age and the loss of his son to war made him feel very much like an Uncle Iroh character. It was honestly quite impressive how this character, who started out as basically a random NPC, had managed to gather so much fanfare over the years. And then, over the course of BFA, this image was systematically ruined for myself and many others. Which is honestly pretty funny when you think about it, because Blizzard released approximately 23 minutes of their highest quality cinematics over the course of the expansion. Saurfang himself was present in all of these cinematics and was a primary focus of all of them, save for the trailer itself. This metric is honestly kind of absurd. No expansion before or since has come close to that figure. You could argue that Shadowlands, Dragonflight, and The War Within each had 2 trailers, but for each of them, one of those essentially boiled down to a sizzle reel. Heck, the Old Soldier cinematic, which was released shortly after the Sylvanas Warbringer, was pretty universally praised by Horde players. It was seen as an acknowledgement by Blizzard that we didn't like what happened at Teldrassil, and that this dissonance was something that was going to be addressed. It was honestly a big relief. So what happened between this point and the end of BFA? What made me sour on Saurfang? Well, I feel like I've distilled it down to 4 major reasons why. The first of these was Saurfang's hypocrisy. As the Horde campaign into Darkshore reached its climax, Sylvanas and Malfurion wound up facing off near Aberdeen. And during this conflict, Saurfang arrives upon the scene and throws an axe into Malfurion's back. This intervention was enough to ensure Malfurion's defeat. As a reward for his assistance, Sylvanas allowed him the opportunity to take Malfurion's head. But Saurfang was so overcome by his regret for dishonorably attacking Malfurion that he refused to follow through, and the opportunity quickly slipped away when Tyrande arrived upon the scene. As a result, both Night Elf leaders were able to escape and Malfurion was able to make a full recovery. Now you may be asking, why is it a bad thing that Saurfang cares so much about honor? Isn't that a core tenet of his character? Well, you would think so, except in the very same war campaign, he showed a complete disregard for honor when he ordered Horde rogues to move ahead of the main force and to take out priority targets in Ashenvale. I'm sorry, but how is ordering the assassination of Night Elves who are just hanging around town in any way compatible with his warrior's honor? It's also important to note that Saurfang has committed many atrocities in his life. He drank the blood of Manaroth alongside other orc leaders. He slaughtered Draenei indiscriminately to the point that he can no longer eat pork because the sound of them being slaughtered reminds him of the death cries of Draenei children. And he also participated in the sacking of Stormwind in the First War. So while you can argue actual numbers, you at least have to recognize that his war crimes are at least comparable to those of Sylvanas's. The two of them really aren't that different from one another. Yet at no point after Teldrassil does Saurfang make an actual attempt to reason with Sylvanas. He just yells at her and calls her out for her crimes, without ever really acknowledging his own. In fact, he only seems to actually do this with Anduin leading up to the Second Siege of Orgrimmar, where he claims that the Horde's crimes are so great that the Alliance would never be able to catch up to them. So while he does feel kind of guilty for what he did in his life, what is it that allows Saurfang to actually live with himself while still admonishing Sylvanas for her actions? Well, the answer is honor. The stupid, nebulous concept of honor. It's a very positive sounding word that doesn't actually mean anything, but allows him to placate his guilt. It allows any orc or other battle-oriented character to go around killing people and still seem heroic for doing so. The concept of honor is rife among the Horde, and for the most part, that's fine. We, as the players, don't really need to examine the morality of slaughtering Quilboar as we shout blood and honor. It is a video game, after all. But if we're actually going to do a dive into the concept of honor, it is nothing more than an excuse. Heck, Sylvanas puts it best when she says that honor means nothing to a corpse. The surface level interpretation of this is just that the Forsaken are cruel and honorless characters. A more forgiving interpretation is that honor isn't something you should care about if it results in you getting yourself killed. But I think the most poignant interpretation is that if you were to ask someone who was just killed if the honor of that killing makes them feel any better about having just died, they would absolutely scoff at the notion. Honor, as the concept exists within the Horde and within Warcraft, isn't just an excuse, it's selfish and narcissistic. This was shown very well earlier on in the War of Thorns when Malfurion attacks Saurfang and the Horde forces. Saurfang attempts to reduce the battle to a 1v1 by challenging Malfurion to Mak'gora. And Malfurion's response basically boils down to, "You serious right now, bro?" And yeah, why would one of the leaders of the Night Elves, while defending against a military incursion, care at all about upholding an orcish honor tradition? And you know, Varok, maybe you did do the honorable thing by sparing Malfurion in Darkshore. Let's ask those Horde soldiers that Malfurion later pulled underground and suffocated how they feel about that. Also, of lesser note, when Saurfang goes to retrieve Thrall from Nagrand, he kind of chastises Thrall for running and hiding from his responsibilities to the Horde. But like, dude, you literally just did that yourself. But we'll get into those actions soon enough. The second factor that led to me disliking Saurfang was the dismantling of him from a legend into a brat. Again, before BFA, Saurfang was a paragon of Horde values, but admittedly, that's pretty much all he was. He was more of a legend or a concept than an actual character, and it's not inherently wrong to delve into that character and see more of his flaws. But the flaws we did see didn't really humanize him, they just made him look like a whiny baby. For example, at Lordaeron, he has the opportunity to take Anduin's life, but spares him. When Anduin later questions him about it, he admits that his hope was that Anduin would go on to kill Sylvanas. This just feels cowardly and underhanded. If you have such a problem with the way Sylvanas is running the show, there's a very clear path for you to take. Mak'gora, something which Sylvanas essentially has to honor, and which you yourself tried to issue against non-Horde characters. But he doesn't actually try this until the second Siege of Orgrimmar, and you have to wonder why. Is he just scared that he's gonna lose? Did he not want to be the cause of a schism within the Horde at this point? The answer could have been interesting if we ever actually explored it, but the most likely answer is that they just wanted Sylvanas versus Saurfang as the climax of that story arc. But regardless of why it happened, it just makes him look bad. Towards the end of the battle at Lordaeron, he does call Sylvanas out for her honorless tactics. When presented with the choice to follow her or stay behind, he chooses to stay behind, hoping that he can just die an honorable death against the Alliance forces. That doesn't happen, and they just capture him instead. And I understand the importance of taking a stand, but what did you actually hope to accomplish here, Saurfang? All you were going to do was die a completely meaningless death. Later on, Thalyssra and Rokan are infiltrating Stormwind to rescue Princess Talanji from the Alliance, and while doing so, they encounter Saurfang in the stockades. They of course try to get him to come along, but he refuses to go, commenting instead on the difference between loyalty and honor. So Horde forces are seemingly unable to get him to budge. In fact, it's only after Anduin, the Alliance King, gives him a pep talk that he decides to leave the stockades, and from there proceed to start his revolution against Sylvanas. Just everything about this chain of events makes him feel kind of pathetic, and I think this is best illustrated when comparing him to his Mop analog, Vol'jin. Very similarly, Vol'jin was not happy with the way that Garrosh was running things. The key difference is that Vol'jin didn't run away from the Horde. He stayed in it as long as possible and tried to implement positive change from within. It was only after Garrosh attempted to have him assassinated that Vol'jin realized he had to operate from the shadows a little bit. Saurfang was always acting for his honor. Vol'jin was acting for the Horde. The third factor towards the downfall of Saurfang, in my eyes, was that he was being pitted against another hero of the Horde. BFA quite literally asked Horde players to choose between Sylvanas and Saurfang, and at this point in time, most players probably still had a fondness for both of them. Even if you were more inclined to support Saurfang, it probably didn't feel great to be working against Sylvanas. And if you were a big Sylvanas fan, then you were literally turning Saurfang into your enemy, and gameplay can inform your viewpoints. One of the most visceral lines from the Reckoning cinematic is when Sylvanas whispers to Saurfang, "I trusted you." Because yeah, look at things from her perspective for a moment. She and Saurfang planned the War of Thorns out together. He was responsible for a ton of the bloodshed that was happening. Then she tries to give him the honor of killing Malfurion, and what does he do with it? He lets him escape. Thereafter, almost everything he does is just tell her off and start a rebellion against her. And look, I am no fan of where they took Sylvanas' character during BFA. They kind of made her act cuckoo bananas and pretty evil! But still, she was a long-standing hero of the Horde, so it just didn't feel good supporting Saurfang either. In fact, throughout BFA, my friends and I kept huffing hopium and waiting for the big Ocean's 11 style reveal that Sylvanas and Saurfang were actually executing some secret elaborate plan the whole time that would absolutely decimate the Alliance forces. Yeah, that didn't pan out. Anyways, the fourth and final reason that I turned on Saurfang is a very simple psychological phenomenon known as reactance. It is a very common and normal human reaction to want to go with the opposite of what you are being aggressively told to do, out of sheer spite and pride. A simple example of this is you are a teenager, it's getting late, and you think to yourself, I should get ready for bed. You're just about to do so when you hear your parent yelling at you, "Oh my gosh, it's so late, go to bed already." Suddenly, going to bed is the very last thing you want to do. And of course, this applies to heavy-handed writing as well. Obviously, any story is going to try to convince you that certain characters are good and certain characters are bad, but there can come a point where a story is just beating you over the head with how they want you to feel about the situation. And this very much happened here with the signaling that Sylvanas is bad and evil, and Saurfang is good and honorable. Horde players were on an interstate, and we kept seeing exits that let us get off and side with Saurfang, but if you did get off, you were never given an option to get back on and side with Sylvanas. And I'm sorry, but I could just not bring myself to hate a character that I had loved since Warcraft 3 just because Blizzard was telling me to. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to adore Saurfang, a character who I had previously had vague positive feelings towards, just because Blizzard told me to. And yes, you could argue that me growing to borderline hate Saurfang was also a result of Blizzard's writing, so they've influenced me either way. But at least my choice in how I responded to it is not the choice that they tried to force upon me. Reactance is a phenomenon that could accurately be described as petulant and immature. I recognize that, and I am willing to accept those labels for myself, in this instance at least. But it's also important for writers to recognize when they may be unintentionally cultivating that response from their audience. So yeah, all in all, Saurfang is just one of a long list of character assassinations that BFA forced us to endure. I wish I still liked the guy. I wish I could go back and watch all of those cinematics and feel good about them, but I just don't, and I probably never will. Anyways, I of course drew Saurfang this week. Despite my feelings on the character, he does have a pretty cool design overall. I did decide to draw him with his chin guard thingy, just because it was so iconic to him before BFA, and that's the version of him that I prefer. And I'm not really sure why they decided to change that about him, other than less armor making him a more sympathetic character. And I decided to just stick him in Durotar. It is where he made his final stand, and it's just a very fitting zone for orcs, you know? It isn't the prettiest of zones, but it is very orange, and orange is a comforting color. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. So, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.